some of the things that are occurring here, you're looking at online searches that involve restraints and surveillance, practicing routes. They've done some dry runs here. There's a great interest in law enforcement and in media cases, what the media is doing.
What you said, sources confirmed to me that they have used polygraph tests and continue to use polygraph tests, which are lie detector tests. They hook you up to a machine and monitor your levels to see essentially see if you're lying. It's not a perfect science, doesn't always stand up in a court of law, but they can sort of use it on the back end of investigations, which I'm told they are using in the Nancy Guthrie case to clear people who they think may have been involved, that they just want to make sure, had nothing to do with it.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
In this analysis, I want to explore the notion of multiple accomplices or a lone wolf. Now, I think there is some substance to the notion that there might be more than one perpetrator in this story. For starters, if this was a home invasion, one can imagine a second or even a third individual raiding a particular residence. Also, if this was a premeditated abduction, one can also imagine there needs to be at least one additional individual to supervise the victim, to exert control over the victim while the other drives. That being said, there are two reasons why I think we may be dealing with a single suspect, a lone wolf. The first reason I suspect we're dealing with a lone wolf is the 41 minutes spent inside the residence. That's an awfully long time to be inside and not steal anything, which suggests the home invasion burglary aspect isn't what we're dealing with here. Think about it. Someone is inside the home for 41 minutes and they don't steal anything. They don't leave a ransom note either. The second reason is that poor Nancy could have been bound and gagged and placed in the trunk of a car. Because of her age, it's not necessarily the case that the perpetrator had help or felt he even needed any. After all, he was armed as well. It's also likely, in my opinion, that we're not only dealing with a lone wolf, but a rank amateur. If this was a group of individuals, presumably they would have consulted one another beforehand on what their strategy would be, and presumably at least one of the individuals had some experience at housebreaking, and probably one of the things that they would have discussed would have been how and where to enter the home, and also how to deal with the cameras. Now, one of my theories in terms of what took so long, what was the perpetrator actually doing inside the home for such a length of time? Well, wasn't it that the perpetrator saw the camera, saw that the light went on, saw that he was caught on camera, and then confronted Nancy about it and wanted her to show him where this footage was and delete it, which of course she couldn't do, and this probably led to an argument and also led to the perpetrator getting more and more frustrated and more angry. Now, in terms of breaking and entering, one expert noted that a far easier and simpler way to break into Nancy's home wasn't to kick in the back door, but to simply break the glass next to it. There's a glass panel next to the front door, and then open the door. And I think that is a reference to the front door, but the same actually applies to the back door, which is partially made of glass. All you would have to do is break one of those little windows, stick your hand through, and open the door. And I hope saying that if you have a door that is like that you're going to take measures to secure it. But the same applies to the Ramsey home. There were plenty of glass doors and windows next to doors that would have made a lot more sense to go into than the supposed intruder route, right? Now, I also want to respond to the theory that a Google search was done on Savannah Guthrie, her income, and also Nancy's address. And you can see what the psychology is here, that it's this idea that someone is trying to get hold of Savannah's money, and so they kidnap her mother with a view to getting Savannah's money. Now, while in theory this is a clever line of questioning, and we've certainly seen some very incriminating search history across several true crime cases. I want to come back to this whole idea, but first let's just look at a couple of intertextual searches that were actually incriminating. Chris Watts Googled how to delete your Instagram account. It's in the discovery. Also, he Googled oxycodone, and he later admitted to trying to poison Shanann to bring about a miscarriage by adding oxy to her shake. So those searches weren't random or for nothing. They were actually quite incriminating. In the Casey Anthony case, someone apparently searched for chloroform, also neck breaking and household weapons on the family computer. Casey's mother later claimed, I think she testified, that she did the search for chloroform as well as alcohol and inhalation. According to ABC News, Cindy Anthony told jurors that she searched for chloroform because she suspected her smallest dog might be getting poisoned from eating leaves in the backyard. Her search started with chlorophyll and spiraled to chloroform, she said. Well, do you believe that? In the Laurie Vallow case, they also uncovered searches for shooting ranges near Rexburg. That was prior to Charles Vallow being shot to death by Laurie's brother, Alex. Have a look at this.
Leading up to the shooting. So you had talked about the fact that this email associated with Alex Cox that is subscribed to Alex Cox searched for places to shoot near Rexburg on the 23rd of September.
Correct.
And we see multiple shooting places to shoot searches. AM, October 2nd, is a couple hours before the shooting.
Correct.
That again, Alex Cox's Gmail account associated and subscribed to him is searching for Brandon Boudreau's address.
And we just want to blank out the address there because we want to be conscious of privacy concerns. Now, in the Guthrie case, they are talking about searches that apparently took place in June or July last year. In other words, 6 months prior to these events. According to Fox News, as the Pima County Sheriff's Department and FBI continue to work on the case, Fox News Digital was able to recreate Google Trends reports that appear to show searches for Nancy's address and Savannah's salary that occurred before her disappearance. They show there may have been activity for Guthrie's address in the Catalina Foothills between June 21st and 28th, 2025, originating in Arizona. And to their credit, they've blanked out those, that sort of sensitive information. But this is about as random as the speculation surrounding a kidnapping reference in Savannah's book, or the fact that Savannah interviewed one of the victims in the Epstein files. 6 months before the time isn't actionable. It's not something that is really evidence. Now, do you remember I mentioned a funnel? Evidence supporting a theory works the same way. If you stumble on a theory and that theory turns out to be valid, what you find is evidence in all sorts of areas starts to come in that supports, that validates your theory. A lot of corresponding evidence, on the other hand, on the one side means you end up with one suspect on the other, and they all sort of work together. All those threads sort of go in a particular direction. But you can't build a case with a single strand of speculation and say that then leads you to some unknown suspect and call that theory worth its salt. And yet so much of true crime is based on random stabs that go nowhere. And that's good enough for a lot of people. And I guess that's the case because many people think in a fragmented way. When you offer them a fragment of information, they think it solves the whole case. No, a dozen fragments that fit together is a theory worth digging into. A single isolated fragment means nothing, such as the theory that Katy Perry is John Bonet. That's a single fragment that connects to nothing besides the appeal of it being shocking. Usually what is shocking is also improbable. By the way, it's also interesting to note how interest in this particular case is starting to wane. And when that happens, what that often leads to, there are desperate folk that desperately want the hamster wheel to keep turning. They want the show to keep going on so that they can make more money, and they'll find ways to kind of manufacture evidence and manufacture interest. And what they'll basically do is try and throw spaghetti at the ceiling, hoping some of it will stick. So you can probably expect a lot of random ideas coming out, but what we really want is evidence that supports other evidence and that takes us in a particular direction. Does that make sense? Anyway, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.